just FYI.
Good evening, everybody. Just doing a quick sound check. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Mara.
Fabulous.
We're live on YouTube already, so just so everybody's aware of that.
Thank you, Karen.
And then Mara, I have a request at the end of this, as we get closer and closer to 7, I'm gonna probably need a minute to, I'll need a minute to stop this, restart the other meeting. I have to switch over it's a lot of technical stuff. I'll have to switch over in Minute Track where I'm recording the meetings, and so I'll need a couple minutes to get that all going.
Okay, thank you. A quick logistics note on that. If we go over 7 o'clock for this, do we just continue in this meeting and postpone the start of our council meeting?
That's what we'll have to do because I have,
Okay.
because they're both set up with me because Dan had to set up the EDA.
Okay.
So what happens if I check out, the whole meeting ends. And
Okay.
that's why we set it that way with the EDA for him.
Perfect. So we'll do full agenda here, and then if that means a delayed start to council, and
Yeah.
yes, we'll give you a few minutes in between to get fully transitioned.
And as people are going in, trying to go into that 7 o'clock meeting, it'll just put them in a holding pattern until I open the meeting up. So they'll be moved into a room, but not the meeting room. Excellent.
Thank you for that.
So Karen, I know that you're planning all that stuff, but I did log on in City of Forest Lake. And so I could take over the hosting of the 6 o'clock meeting if you want to jump to the 7 o'clock meeting.
The problem is there's only one login in the Google. There's actually 2. Only one of them live streams to YouTube.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Never mind.
Yep. Nope. Thanks for the offer, but we thought of all of that and thought, how can we do this? And this is the way we got to do it. Dan's not live streaming the EDA to YouTube right now. That's on Facebook, and then he's recording it actually so that he can later post it. We got one live stream. This is it.
Karen, one more logistics note for you.
Mhm.
Do attendees of this meeting or anybody who wants to speak in a public hearing, do they stay in a waiting room until we're at the hearing portion, or are they in for the entire meeting? How does that work for this meeting?
Yeah, so when I send out the invites to a webinar, there's 2 ways it gets set up in Zoom, either a meeting or a webinar. A meeting is just one whole link, and that gets sent out. We only have one link to send. That pulls people directly into a meeting. When we set it up as a webinar, which this is, which allows us to live stream the webinar, that link only goes out to council members and staff, but there is a link to copy that I send out to people where they can register for the meeting. That sends an email off to them and then pulls them in as an attendee. Then during the meeting, I can move them in as a full participant. So it holds them as an attendee.
Perfect. And they're able to view during that time. They're just not in the meeting room. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I know we're just getting logged in here. We'll get started here at the top of the hour. Just quick logistics note, we are streaming on YouTube, so.
And so currently I have one attendee waiting. And so for that attendee, if and when you want to speak, you would do the hand raise in that chat function or on your screen, and I would be able to move you directly into the meeting. That's Jerry Gruntner that's waiting as an attendee right now. So I don't know if Jerry wants to speak or not, but.
Fantastic, thank you. Good evening, everybody. We are right at 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call tonight's special meeting, our Truth and Taxation meeting, to order. Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Gerard.
Here.
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
Councilmember Munson.
Here.
Councilmember Byström.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here. I'd invite everybody to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like to shut off your camera before you do so, you may. And I believe Dan is not here to display the flag, so we are going to just close our eyes and imagine a flag in front of us. And with that, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, we have before us this evening our Truth and Taxation agenda. I would like to, before I ask for approval of the agenda, I would like to just wordsmith one small item, but I think it's important tonight. We have item number 5E is the consideration of resolution approving, and this should be all 2021 budgets, not just the general fund budget. We are approving all budgets this evening, and then also the levy is for consideration. With that slight wordsmithing, is there, I'm asking for a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Gerard.
Aye.
Sorry. Councilmember Husnick.
Aye.
Councilmember Munson.
Aye.
Councilmember Byström.
Aye.
Mayor Bain.
Aye, and our agenda is approved. This evening, we have our truth and taxation hearing. Just a quick tee up on kind of our sequencing. We're going to hear first the third quarter financial report, and then we are going to hear the levy and budget presentation. From that point, we will open it up to our public hearing, and we will hear public input on both the levy and the budget. I will combine those into a single public hearing, even though they're listed as separate agenda items. And then we will bring it back to council for any questions, further discussion and consideration. Any questions on logistics this evening? You're an attendee, we're glad you're here. When we get to that public hearing portion, we will have you raise your hand, and at that point you'll be brought into the meeting, and we welcome your comments. With that, third quarter financial report, Sandy or Pat?
Yes, I will start that and I'll share my screen and hopefully you can see it. Hopefully everybody can see it on their screen.
Correct.
This is the third quarter report through September 30th of 2020. And I'm going to go through not necessarily line by line, but highlight some of those items where you know, I think there needs to be discussion or just maybe kind of remaining discussion, because really what I'm seeing is the same thing as what we had in our second quarter. There's the revenues are coming in less, which we anticipated. Looking at the license and permits, they're coming in less than what they were in the prior year, as well as the charges for services. And that's going to be because of the building permits, and fines and forfeitures are also coming in less than the prior year. So it's basically what we've seen in that second quarter. The same thing is happening, and this is what we anticipated was going to continue to happen throughout the year. Under miscellaneous revenue, we had brought those budgets for interest revenue down or up a little bit from what we had in the budgets last year. And it's, even though it's going a little bit over what we have budgeted, it's of course more in line with our budgets than what it was in the prior year. And that was to be anticipated as well. And looking through the expenditures, though, I really don't see any problems as far as comparing the trend to the prior year. But I do want to note, looking under that emergency management, that's where we spent our COVID money. And so you're going to see high expenditures in that area because of that. But looking at everything else, I really don't see anything that is, you know, and what was different too with the election is we brought our budgets up from prior year compared to prior year because this was an election year. So looking at the bottom line though, for the general fund, I don't see, like I said, the only issues I see is because of the revenue, which we anticipated. And then going on to surface water, again, I'm not seeing the issues any different than what we've seen in the second quarter. We did have that intergovernmental revenue in there that we will not be recognizing this year. We had that as a placeholder. That isn't going, we aren't going to be having any grants coming in, but that interest revenue, of course, is going to be coming in over our budgets, which I anticipate going to be offsetting most of that in the year. And looking at the wages again and everything else, I'm not seeing, you know, there's some things that may be spent earlier, like in professional services and repairs than what there was in the prior year, but I don't anticipate at the end of the year that it to be an issue in this fund. And looking at the graph, we had payments coming in for charges a different time of the year. Last year it was in June. This year it was or July. This year it was in August. But you know, I see that, you know, this year it's might be coming in a little bit later than it was in the prior year. So we're going to keep monitoring that. And if there's a difference in how much we've received in the years, we'll have to monitor that at a later date and make sure that there isn't some late payments coming in September. And the airport fund, I didn't see anything again differently, other than I do want to explain the capital outlay. We have grant opportunities that we have right now where we're spending the money and we get reimbursement for it. So we have to spend it before we actually get the reimbursement. So you're going to see a high dollar amount in that capital outlay, but we're anticipating getting revenue sources coming in for that as we send in those reimbursements. But looking at overall, I don't see, again, the trend from prior year, it's pretty similar. So I don't see anything alarming there either in this fund. And looking at that 9-month comparison of the AV sales, the ag rent and the hangar rent, even though they may be coming in at different times, as you've seen on that top page, the revenue sources are in line with our budget. So this just kind of gives an idea of when we're receiving some of that revenue and at what point. And then looking at the water fund, I'm not seeing anything different other than I do want to mention again, like I did the second quarter, that interest earnings is going to be a lot higher. We have that bond money in here where we're doing those projects. So that is going to be reconciled at the end of the year to anticipate that, make sure that the proper interest is in each fund. But looking at where it is right now, I don't anticipate that changing very much. Connection charges, they aren't as much as what they were in the prior year. So that's something, again, that changed due to where we're at in the economy today. But looking at the expenditures, we're underspending in a lot of areas. The bond interest is coming in line with everywhere what we anticipated. Depreciation expense, I think I mentioned this during the second quarter. During our audit and after the budgets were approved, we noticed that there was some capital outlays that we should have had in the depreciation. So there's a little bit of an off there, but nothing that's too drastic and compared to the prior year. But other than that, I think the fund is going to be ending up in a good situation at the end of the year as well. And looking at the graph, this is what you would anticipate. Like I said, different times of the year that we receive the payments, but you would anticipate that 2020 would be higher than that 2019, which is the case because we did increase our rates. And going on to the sewer fund, again, I didn't see anything too drastic there either. It's pretty much in line with what we anticipated, pretty much in line with the expenditures. So I don't anticipate that there's going to be any issues in this fund either. And again, that graph is similar to what the water fund shows, where 2020 is showing as an increase, which we would anticipate to be occurring at this point. So with that, and should mention the cash. Here's the cash, and it gives an example of what it was in the prior year and what it was in the current year as far as what we're investing in and the investment type, as well as a comparison to the prior quarter as far as how long we're investing. And, we're trying to diversify, and we used to have it all in CDs, and now we're trying to diversify more to have a better portfolio, as well as getting better rates. Government security seems to be the place right now where we get better rates. So we've been centering a lot of attention on investing in that area, but also to make sure that there's that diversification again, and trying to put it out longer. But yet have that liquidity so that we, if we need it, we can get it more readily. So that's basically what that shows. And unless there's any questions, I can move on to the next presentation.
Excellent. Any questions for Sandy? And we typically do a motion to approve at this point as well. And so happy to entertain any questions you may have. Sandy, can you just stop sharing just for a moment so we can see all faces on screen? And as soon as we do that, somebody's going to ask a question that you're going to want to flip the screen again. So any questions for Sandy on the third quarter 2020 presentation? Not
I
seeing,
just-
go ahead.
Yeah, I noted a, fairly sizable loss in our investments between Q2 and Q3 there, Sandy. Did we see a downturn in the market that impacted those? I mean, the market's been pretty strong, so I'm not
No,
sure if I saw that correctly. So
no, and sometimes it's maturities happening too at a particular time where
Okay.
they're getting reinvested. I didn't see, and it's all a matter too of what the need is for the cash flow.
okay.
It's always continually being monitored. So I don't anticipate that, our cash flow is going to, it changes from period to period, but doesn't necessarily change from the overall annual investments.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that to be an issue.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to study that for one more minute before you popped it down. So thank you for walking me through that.
Any other questions on the third quarter? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
A motion to approve the third quarter financial budget presentation. Financial report, I guess.
We have a motion from Councilmember Gerard and a second from Councilmember Husnick.
Yep.
Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. Karen, could we have a quick roll call?
Councilmember Gerard,
Aye.
Councilmember Husnick,
Aye.
Councilmember Munson,
Aye.
Councilmember Byström,
Aye.
and Mayor Bain.
Aye. And motion approved. All right. Next item this evening is the budget presentation. Sandy, go ahead.
And hopefully everybody can see it on their screen. And the main reason why we're here today, again, is to go through the truth and taxation meeting. It's a requirement as a city that we do this according to legislation. And we are required to do that at a particular time. And we have to have the levy certified by the end of this year. And here's a few of the meeting requirements that are required. To provide a budget summary for fiscal year 2021, provide the proposed levy summary for taxes payable 2021, and of course, to provide opportunity for public input. And here's the general fund and all the other funds that we will be budgeting. And we're going to be excluding TIF and enterprise funds for now. TIF is something that we budget for, but it doesn't necessarily have any effect on the levy or anything of that sort, as well as the enterprise funds too. But we're going to be going through the enterprise funds, and you do have a detailed budget of the TIF funds as well. And looking at this, the general fund, we're anticipating revenue and expense neutral, not changing the fund balance, but having a budget of $10,095,227. The park dedication fund, we're going to be dipping into the fund balance of $282,874, but we are anticipating adding to that fund balance this current year because we did not spend what we anticipated spending. So we budgeted $422,141 of expenditures and $139,267 of revenues. The surface water did have a good fund balance coming through from 2019, but that is going to be spent down over these next few years, and we anticipated that to happen. And so we're going to be spending down in 2021 $238,429, where we have expenditures of $727,329 and revenues of $488,900. Drug forfeiture is revenue expense neutral. That doesn't have any effect on the fund balance of $30,000 of both revenues and expenditures. Capital improvement, that's something we have a fund balance for as well. And what you'll see is there's going to be a separate line for streets bond project fund. We have to keep it in a separate account because that's the bond project money that we received. And we're going to be spending that down by $1,627,000. But we have plenty of fund balance from those funding sources available for that. The capital improvement, we're going to be spending down $56,000, which there's fund balance available, and having expenditures of $1,328,000 with revenues of $1,272,000. The EDA fund is close to being revenue neutral. It's adding actually $270 to the fund balance with expenditures of $50,730 and revenues of $51,000. The airport fund, we're anticipating adding $18,147 to the fund balance with expenditures of $122,553 and revenues of $140,700. The capital equipment, we do anticipate spending down the fund balance of $58,306. The expenditures are going to be coming in at $1,048,001 and the revenues at $989,695. And the next slide shows the debt service funds and the different funds that we have available to pay that bond debt. The revenue for the YMCA debt service is $602,230. Expenditures at $593,080, bringing a fund balance change of $9,150. And the debt service pavement, which is the street projects, $313,250 in revenue and $312,375 in expenditures, bringing it $875 in fund balance. And the refunding that occurred last year is the debt service EDA refunding bond, and that's revenue is coming in at $1,415,600 and expenditures of $1,363,725, bringing that increase in the fund balance of $51,875. And we worked, Patrick and I worked with Ellers to really kind of look at those fund balances and kind of see what those payment needs are and what the revenue sources that we should be bringing in to make that right.
Karen, just a quick note for anybody who's watching, that what we're calling that EDA refund or that EDA refunding fund balance, that is for the city center that had previously been funded for by the EDA. So that is city center support.
Thank you. And the next page, we're going to go through the enterprise funds, and just so put a little note in there that debt service for the enterprise funds are funded by the enterprise funds, and they're not, they're within these funds and being paid out of these funds. So the water fund, the revenue is coming in at $2,781,698 and expenditures at $2,750,750, increasing that fund balance $30,948. And the sewer fund and the rates, I just want to say, was the rates that we put in that Patrick had brought to the council at the last meeting to reflect what Ellers had reflected in their 10-year plan. And the revenue for the sewer fund that we put in was $3,566,080 with expenditures of $3,599,046. And that did bring a slight decrease to the fund balance of $32,966. And this graph is shows what the revenue budgets are. And as you see on the bottom, the different sources of revenue funds. And again, we're excluding TIF and as well as the bond projects and the enterprise funds, so that doesn't skew things and make it look a little skewed, because those are separate funds for separate purposes. So looking at this, really a big part of what we get revenue sources from is the general fund and the debt service levy. The general levy and the debt service levy. I mean, that's a big part of what our revenue sources are. But we also get franchise fees of 5%, intergovernmental of 5.6%. I mean, a lot of that has to do with police revenue coming in. We get a very small $95,000 amount for the general levy. But really that has a lot to do with the police revenue coming in and other sources. We also have charges for services at 8%, but I'll let you take a look at those other smaller sources that come in for fines and forfeitures, many miscellaneous license permits, park dedication, and other financing that makes up for the rest. And this graph shows the expenditure budgets, again, excluding TIF, bond projects, and enterprise funds, and doing it by function. We put the certain functions into different funds. And so doing a self-balancing fund for particular functions. And looking at this, when you look at the operational general fund as well as the debt service, you're going to see that that encompasses the majority of the expenditures. But there is going to be, you know, some throughout the like surface water at 4.5 and 6.5 for capital equipment. And again, I'm going to let you look at some of those other ones, but they represent the other pieces of what our expenditure budgets are. And then going through this slide, this is just the general operation expenditure, and wanted to break that down more granular as well, and to see what that is being spent on, just to give everybody an idea. And looking at this, if you look at the police and the fire, I mean, that's 50% of it there. So 50%, 42.7 is the police and 7.2 is the fire. And then when you look at the public works at 13.8%, there's another big portion of it. And looking, there's other portions as well. And for the general government at 12%, I just want to remind, last year it was about 8%, and that was because we added the insurances into the instead of putting them all across the different departments, we put it all into that area so that we could budget more easier, but yet not, you know, hold each department to the insurances, because that's something that they can't really control. And it's something that we just have to have out there. So we're just going to control it more differently this year. And looking at 8.3 at the parks and recs. And again, I'm going to let you look at those other areas, which encompasses the rest of the expenditure budgets, but them are the bigger ones that we have in our general operations. And looking at the tax levy summary, the general fund operational, and this is a comparison of the proposed for 2021 to what we had in 2020. And looking at the general fund operational, we are proposing a tax levy of $8,116,719, which is a 5.13% increase from the prior year. Capital equipment of $800,000, which is a 6.67%, even though it's $50,000, it just ends up being a 6.67. Capital improvement, we brought it up 50,000 by bringing it to 100,000. Debt service, that's just something that's paying for what we need to for our debt service payments at 2,331,080, a slight change of 2.2%. EDA was across the board neutral to last year at 50,000. And parks and trails, we decided to add the 50,000 to start to fund the parks and trails. And looking at that bottom line, the total proposed 2021 levy is $11,447,799, which is an overall dollar increase of $595,838, which brings it to a 5.49% increase from the prior year. And here's a slide that kind of shows where the levy goes and where the tax levy revenue sources go to. The majority is going to be to the general fund at 71%, and that is the major portion of the city's budget. Most of the city's labor costs, materials, and supplies that support the city. Capital equipment amounts to 7%, That's long-term funding mechanism that we address some certain pieces of equipment, and I'll let you read some of those: fire trucks, snow plows, all the equipment that we need in order to do the services that we can do. Capital paving improvement of 0.9%. Again, that's was a effort to put some funding sources in for street paving and repairs. A lot of that is, paid by the state and franchise fees, as well as the bond funding that we will see in the debt service. And debt service is at 20.3. And again, just wanted to reiterate, this does not include the water fund or the sewer fund. That is separately monitored in those funds and paid for in those funds. Economic Development Fund at a 0.4%, and the Park Dedication Fund at a 0.4%. And this next graph shows the levy increases over the last few years, as well as what we propose for 2021. And you can look across, other than in 2019, we're kind of at that same level that we've been in the last few years. 2020, we had 5.74, but we're closing in 2021 at 5.49. And the history of the tax rate also is shown here. And again, it's pretty much in line with what we had last year. It's, going up a little bit. Our market rate is, or our market value actually didn't go up as much as last year. And so, there's a slight change there that occurred, but there's different components that of course contributed to that, but I can kind of explain that later as well. And this is a sample home tax impact. As you see, the 2020 taxes are on the left side for the particular home market values. And looking at proposed 2021 tax impact, last year they were assuming a 5.3%, I believe, change in market value. And this year they changed it to a 1.2% change in market value based on what they're seeing, which is Washington County out there. So that had an impact, as well as we have this thing called fiscal disparities, where it actually goes up or down, and this year it actually had a favorable impact. So all in all, when everything is factored in, this is what we see as the proposed or estimated tax impact for 2021 proposed levy. And at like $150,000 home, it's at $511,000 or $511.91. And you can kind of read down there, and going up to a $300,000, it's $1,174.59. So there's a comparison for you to review to kind of see, have a feeling, not necessarily 100%, but it's an estimate at this point. And with that, that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
I guess at this point, I would ask council if there's any immediate technical questions around the presentation. And then I would ask us to perhaps hold any more detailed conversations or discussion until after we've had the public hearing. So any technical questions we want to get out of the way before we open up the public hearing? And council members, please jump. I'm not seeing all of you, so jump in if I'm not seeing your raised hand. I'm not, okay. With that, we're going to hold questions, any further questions then, until after the public hearing. And so I will open up the public hearing, and there's two items on the agenda that we're going to cover all together. One is for the levy and the other is for the budget. And if there's anybody from the public that would like to address council, I welcome you to do so at this time. And I see one with a hand up. And bringing Mr. Grentner into our meeting. There we go. Welcome, Jerry. It looks like you might be on mute. There we go.
There we go. It works.
Welcome. Glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, Mayor Bain, council, and staff, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight a little bit. I sent a letter to mayor and council here dated December 4th regarding the change in the lake improvement protection funding. And hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it, review it. Hopefully it made some sense. Also sent along with that a very simple Excel spreadsheet talking about the costs of what we spend on Forest Lake in 2020 and also our expected 2021. So what I want to talk to you tonight is a little bit about the consideration of what you're doing or suggesting you're going to recommend of changing, moving the Lake Improvement Protection Fund or budget, I should say, from the general fund to the surface water fund. In the last few weeks, I've received a number of phone calls, emails. This discussion has hit social media. Even the newspaper had to speak about it with the review of the last council meeting. So there's been a number of inquiries regarding it. I have to say there's confusion with it. There's confusion with, I've heard, well, they're defunding the lake to what are they doing? So, it's one of those when a last minute thing like this happens, people and taxpayers get a little bit nervous about things. It's to be understood. The lake improvement protection budget and the funding for Forest Lake from the city of Forest Lake has been ongoing for many, many years, at least 15 years, probably even longer. And back around 2009 even, the city was spending about $60,000 for running harvesters to cut vegetation in the lake and to hopefully keep the lake, navigable as such. So back 12 years ago, the city was spending $60,000 on the lake, and we're currently anticipate spending $62,000. So not much of an increase over 12 years when you sit back and think about this. I think 2009 was also the year that the surface water fee was initiated by the city. It started out at $8 a year. I did a lot of research on this. And last year it was $40, and I want to commend council on raising that surface water fee to $48 for 2021. So that still puts us in the lower 50% of the metro communities. I mean, an $8 a year increase for the surface water fund is nothing. Even though it's a 20% increase, it's $8 a year. But it's very critical to the overall work that needs to be done to protect Forest Lake itself. In June of 2014, you passed resolution 0609-1403, which created the Surface Water Management Fund. When we heard about what the council was doing, we had our attorney review that resolution. That resolution is very vague. It does not state what those funds are to be used for. It doesn't state where they can be used. So it basically allows the city to decide when and where to use those surface water funds for. Now, unfortunately, the name of the fund would imply that it's to be used for surface water. And we all know the city has an obligation as an MS4 permittee to maintain the permit and to do improvements to surface water, which almost all waters, not all waters, but most all waters in the city of Forest Lake flow into Forest Lake. Some go up to Comfort, but the majority goes directly into Forest Lake. So, one of the things that's been confusing to people, I think, is that people don't understand what the surface water fund is. I really, really believe the city needs to communicate this with absolute transparency as to what this fund is being used for and what they are paying that fee for. Because right now, is absolute confusion. Even in the paper, the Forest Lake Times, they quoted some weird name. I think called it a sewer fund instead of the surface water fund. So, you know, even the newspaper doesn't get it right, and people read that. So it's an item that I would ask you to take to task in 2021, is to help better understand what that is and communicate that to people. You know, there's 1,100 lakeshore homeowners on Forest Lake. And that represents 15% of the households in the city of Forest Lake. There's about 7,500 households in Forest Lake. And those homeowners that live on the lake spend at least an extra $1 million in taxes. And so there's an expectation that, you know, the quality of Forest Lake is important to them, and that there's some value they get for the additional taxes that those homeowners pay to live on the lake. What that is, I don't know, but there is an expectation from them because of the additional taxes they pay. In 2020, and I mentioned this in my letter also to you, we have factual documentation that over 10,000 boats launched into Forest Lake at the 3 public accesses. 10,000 boats. There is no other recreational entity or activity in the city of Forest Lake that draws that much public attention. And those boat owners and those boat users, they stop and get gas, they stop and get something to eat, they stop at the stores. They are helping all the local businesses, you know, maintain, in the 2020 COVID, helping to maintain some of their revenue. So, you know, we can't ignore what a revenue generator the lake is for the community of Forest Lake also. The needs of the lake are huge. If you looked at my Excel spreadsheet, we spent about $151,000 to $155,000 in 2020 on the lake. These were for EIS treatments, watercraft inspections, other improvements. Our projection for 2021 is that number will be around $219,000. That's a significant increase. No one entity can pay $219,000. You know, it's going to take a partnership of the city, the Lake Association, the Watershed District, and whatever grants we can get also. The last couple of days, I've had the chance to review the documents that came out for this meeting, the detailed budget and the actual resolution that you're going to consider tonight. One of the things that I have some confusion about is in regarding to the Surface Water Management Fund, is that I want to make sure the council understands that by moving the funds from the general fund to the Surface Water Management Fund, you are really hurting the lake by $62,000. Because that $62,000 that will be coming out of the Surface Water Management Fund to help pay for the lake improvement and protection fund for the lake is not going to allow that $62,000 to be spent on surface water management and surface water projects that help protect Forest Lake. So the lake is actually losing $62,000 of improvements in health. The other thing I noticed in the surface water management detailed breakdown, and maybe I don't understand this, but there is a $265,000 budget line item for capital outlay of equipment. In 2019, that number was $53,000. 2020, it was $76,000. I don't understand why in 2021 it's now $265,000. That's $265,000 of funding that could be going to projects or activities that help improve the surface drainage, surface water that flows into Forest Lake. So I'm not sure what it is. I don't know why it's such a big number, $265,000 out of the total expected expenditure of $727,000. That's a huge number. I don't know what that is. I would hope that someone would be able to tell us as taxpayers what that $265,000 is being spent on and what it's for. So in conclusion, we're requesting, first of all, number one, that you do increase the budget for Forest Lake from the $62,000 to the $75,000 that we have met with the council for the last couple of years to talk about. We ask that you not move it to the Surface Water Fund, but if you decide that you need to move it to the Surface Water Fund, we'd like you to get that $62,000 to be increased to the $75,000, and to have consideration to better understand what that $265,000 is in that fund. And, I understand, and I think everyone in the community understands, there's lots of needs within the city. Parks, lakes, and trails has a significant need. I get it, I understand it. However, I think we all got to understand also that the namesake for the city of Forest Lake is the lake, Forest Lake. And if we don't continue to protect and improve the lake itself, we won't have a city at some time down the road if we have a lake that is destroyed or deteriorated. So thank you for your consideration. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jerry, for being here this evening. We will move on in the public hearing and Jerry, if you don't mind hanging on here in case there are some council questions, I do want to just move through the public hearing and perhaps we come back if there are some more specific questions or follow-ups to the points that you bring up. So I don't mean to be dismissive in moving on in the public hearing. And I would ask if there is anybody else that would like to speak as part of the public hearing. And ask one more time if there's anybody else that would like to speak as part of the public hearing. And not seeing anybody. Karen, you're not seeing anybody either. We will close the public hearing and bring conversation back to council. Again, council, if you have specific questions for Mr. Gretner, feel free to engage. With that, bring conversation back to council. If you have questions of staff, happy to entertain any questions that you may have or discussion points. Maybe if I would suggest while it's fresh, we talk about some of the lake points and maybe clarify some of those questions that come up. And Councilmember Bystrom, you had your hand up first. Councilmember Munson, we'll come back to you. Maybe Councilmember Bystrom, you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, Jerry, you're kind of preaching to the choir here with me. I'm a champion for the lake, and I don't live on the lake, but I recognize that it is our namesake, and we need to be actively engaged in protecting the health of it as a city. Does that mean we fund everything? Absolutely not. But it does mean that we work together and we work to provide a reasonable amount of support on our end. On the surface, not to play on words here, moving the funds to the Surface Water Fund seemed to me like a reasonable thing to do when we did that. But as I've had a chance to reflect on it, I'm curious as to whether or not we kind of have a compliance issue here with that. Is this a reasonable shift? Does this make sense? Again, on the surface, it feels like it does to me. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want to have our commitment to this work get lost in that regard either. But I'm not sure who can answer that question. Is this fund typically dedicated to those MS4 projects only? Ryan, perhaps, maybe could address that for us. I'm not sure.
Ryan Patrick also had his hand up as well. So sorry,
Well, let me
cut you off.
before Ryan jumps in.
The compliance issue, the answer is no. There is no compliance issue with any state agency or state authority or county authority. It's basically what the council believes is appropriate to budget and how they budget it. The shift of this is not meant to diminish the funding of the lakes. It's actually more to protect it. One of the things that you, and Jerry's correct, if we haven't raised, any money, $60,000 for however many years he mentioned, that's tough to, like any of us know, is tough to hold on to a budget and still try to do something with the same amount. However, by shifting out of the general fund, one of the things that happens in the general fund, and I think you're all aware, is that every year there's pressure on the general fund, and that directly relates to pressure on the levy. So if we were to entertain increases in the lake funding, that would mean there's be more pressure on the general fund, more pressure on the levy, and quite frankly, a less likelihood to fund increases in the lake. What we're trying to do here is put it in the surface water, and I could agree that might be some confusion with the name versus what the actual are, but we fund other things out of this besides MS4, street improvements, the share of street improvements for stormwater and things like that. What we'd like to do is be able to plan for those increases in a regular fashion, similar to what we've done with the capital improvement fund, the capital equipment fund. We would like to have it in a place where we can say, okay, give us your 5-year plan and let's see how much we can afford. And then that's based on what the rates might be. It's an enterprise fund. It's the same thing as a sewer or water fund. I think it's transparent. I think it's clear, and I think it's actually just a better way to do things, so that we're not trying to run and catch our tail to try to increase the lake funding. I think if Jerry tomorrow or next year, sometime by May, it would give us a 5-year plan. I'd hand it to Dave, and Dave would then try to figure out how to, he's the one who budgets the surface water, try to include that all in what the requests are. That's the whole reasoning behind this. It's again, trying to make things work the right way.
Thank you, Patrick. Councilmember Munson, I think you had your hand up next, and we'll just kind of go in order here.
I did, but I think my question was answered. Jerry referred to moving it over to the surface water would be a loss of dollars for the lake, but I think I've got.
Yeah, let me clarify. There is no loss. I mean, it's just a shift of responsibility. Which fund's going to pay for it? It's still $62,000. It's not $29,000 or whatever it might be. I'm not sure I understand the concept of a loss, because it still is going to be identified in that fund for lake issues.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that point. So the year-over-year planned funding of what used to be in that general fund line item, that isn't changing. It's just moving from the general fund to the surface water management fund. Is that correct?
Nothing's changing at this point.
Okay.
But I think Jerry's point, and I want a clarification on this as well. I think Jerry's point is that if we are now pulling the 62,000 that we would have historically pulled from the general fund, if we're pulling that from the surface water fund, that's 62,000 less we have in the surface water fund for other projects, correct?
Yeah, we're not making a one-on-one transfer. It is part of the surface water. It will become part of the surface water projects, yeah. So it's incorporated, and it'll be another part of how we judge what surface water projects get done. So, 62,000 for surface water, yeah, it'll be less, but it's not a major impact on the surface water fund.
I do want to make a point here that, so one of the reasons why I've liked this approach is that, and I suspect, having been on prior councils that have voted on this budget, I suspect one of the reasons why funding hasn't increased over the years has been that it is always that incremental pressure on the general fund, and it's tough to stomach that at many times. And that might be one of the reasons why we've not seen an increase. And so one of the reasons why I like having it in the Surface Water Management Fund is that two things. One, it allows us to take a more project-based approach, as Patrick mentioned, of what is the 5-year project plan, recognizing some years will be bigger than others, and it lets us be planful of that. And I also want to be clear that there's nothing that precludes council from supplementing that Surface Water Management Fund with general fund dollars if, when we're looking at the whole of here's everything this fund needs, if there isn't sufficient fund balance to support that from either fund balance or from planned revenues, we can always, there's nothing that precludes us from doing a general fund transfer. And having those options on the table gives us a lot more flexibility than what we've had today. And that's been one of the reasons why I've supported this approach, because again, as we've seen how these projects are materializing, they aren't the same year to year. And this allows us to take a little bit of a long-term approach and fund appropriately based on the needs of the lake. So I you know, it's one of the reasons why I've supported this. One of the feedback points that I've heard is we've lost our transparency, and you'll see from the detail that we just saw in the third quarter financial report that while it's in a different place and it's in a different page, there's actually, I think, more detail presented of having it in the Surface Water Management Fund. You saw we went through an entire page of that Surface Water Management Fund, reviewing all of the, beginning fund balance, all of the revenues, all of the expenses, ending fund balance. And there is certainly opportunity for at least the same level of transparency, and I would say even a little more definition in this approach. But I do appreciate that all needs to be communicated and isn't necessarily intuitive. And so I do think that we do have some communication work to do on this, because I can appreciate, again, that it's not necessarily intuitive of hearing the words. Dave, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Hear me?
Yes.
Just a couple points to hit on for Jerry and the council. Very true what you said, Mayor Bain. It's hard to put a 5-year CIP together on a line item in a general levy that says weed harvester. Right now, that's the lake fund is under weed harvester as the title. Moving it to surface water management, as Mr. Casey said as well, working with Jerry, we can lay out a 5-year CIP and then dedicate funds that way. It's easier, more transparent to lay it out that way. It's hard to put a 5-year CIP on a light item inside the general fund. So, well, it seems like it's less transparent. I agree with you, Mayor Bain, that you're going to be able to see a lot better of what that money's spent on, and also to plan future projects. Answer a couple other questions while I'm on here for Jerry. The capital equipment 2019 was a shared purchase with the sewer and water fund to buy an excavator. That was purchased instead of contracting out culvert digs and storm sewer catch basin repairs and all that. The city bought an excavator, and instead of spending $5,000 to $10,000 a dig with the contractor, we're able to do it in-house just by buying the supplies. I can lay that out for you at a January meeting and show you that we already paid for the excavator and the amount of projects we did between sewer, water, and storm. So that's what the 19 purchase. The 2020 purchase was for a televising truck. That was another shared purchase between sewer and water fund and the storm water fund, and it's a camera truck that we can drive up and down the storm pipes and culverts to see what condition they're in. So instead of guessing at we should do this road project and repair all the culverts and catch basins on this road, we can now drive up and down these pipes with a camera on a vehicle and televise it to save ourselves money, to not replace stuff that we don't need to. If there's a plug in the line, we can see what it's plugged up and unplug it and whatnot. 2021, that $245,000 is for a street sweeper, a mechanical street sweeper. It's to replace the 2006 Elgin Pelican sweeper. It's supposed to be 10 years, 5,000 hours. Obviously, we're at 15 years and about 2,000 hours over that. So that is what that 2021 purchase is. I do agree with Jerry. It's my fault that I'm not more transparent with that. Usually those stormwater meetings, the plan in 2020 was to give a better presentation for the surface water fund. But as you all know, COVID hit us, and that was kind of a virtual meeting or just posted online. So definitely more than willing to work with Jerry in early 2021 to work on a 22 budget, as well as, laying out what we're spending in 21. That's I think I hit everything that Jerry was kind of talking about there, but it's just to echo that moving it from the general fund into surface water is, in my mind, a better way to do it. It fits underneath surface water with the lake, other than just under a line item of weed harvester in the general fund.
Ryan, go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, just a couple points since I haven't heard it. Want to bring up, so the surface water management fee or fund brings revenue from all properties in the city and not just the properties that pay taxes. So that's a positive. And then as you continue to see land in the city develop and transition into housing or commercial property or industrial property, that automatically is going to increase the fund balance, even if you guys never make another decision. So same thing with the franchise fees. If we would have never ever raised another dime of revenue 10 years ago, we still would have seen an increase in revenue because more housing units, so each property is then, looked at back to a residential equivalent unit, then it applies in a chart with commercial industrial. So it's always more than one unit. Typically those commercial properties, when they redevelopments, are anywhere between 4 and 8 units. So that times your annual rate is what they pay versus a residential home will pay the 48. So those are two things that I didn't hear tonight. I just wanted to bring up why this funding fund has two benefits that the general levy does not.
Thank you, Ryan. Councilmember Byström.
Yeah, I'm in support of the shift, but I do think that we, again, to Jerry's point, really need to be transparent with our taxpayers about this. I think we need some communication, better understanding of what this fund is, what it's utilized for, and its appropriateness related to the shift of the support for the work that Forest Lake Association is doing. That's my first point. And I'm not quite sure when we need to shift to our regular meeting here, but I do want to propose, before we move on to consideration of this resolution, I'd like to see some additional funds directed to Forest Lake Association this year. I'm not exactly sure if that's surface water funds. I have a proposal that I'd like to present to council after hearing and better understanding through the timeline for Everyone Belongs in Forest Lake. I'd like to make a proposal that we reallocate for this year anyway, $10,000 from our Human Rights Commission fund to Forest Lake Association. So we can get closer to that goal, closer to that request that they're asking for. I know that I fought hard to be sure those dollars were there, but I'm somewhat embedded in that work, and it doesn't look like we're going to need all of those funds probably for 2021. So that seems to be a logical place to shift some dollars, of course, unless they're available in that surface water fund.
So
Just a technical, that would be a transfer from the general fund to the surface water fund. I think that's an appropriate transfer. That's how we would record it.
Okay.
A quick, just logistics check here. We are going to stay in this meeting until we are adjourned, and the council meeting will just pick up after. So there is no need to play beat the clock. So we can take as much time as we need here tonight. We are only limited by curfew, and I don't suspect we're going to go that late. A couple of points are brought up. I do like Councilmember Bystrom's proposal here on perhaps there's an opportunity, a reallocation of some funds that had been dedicated for Human Rights Commission. I agree with her that work is not as far as long as maybe we had expected back in September when those dollars were allocated. Also, council remembers that we have approved some funds that weren't planned in 2020. And so Kathy, was your number 10,000? Is that what stood out to you? And
yeah,
I could.
I think it allows us to leave a few dollars there. I think we've got probably about 5,000 left in that commission's fund, so that if they do get up and running, third, fourth quarter of the year, they do have some resources to work with. I didn't want to shift it all, but it certainly seems reasonable to reallocate some of it at this point in time. And then we have an opportunity to start working on that plan, taking a look at that surface water fund, and ensuring that we are kind of meeting our obligations, whatever we determine they may be, to the Forest Lake Association.
Yeah, so couple of follow-up comments to that. So agree on the transfer of funds to the Surface Water Management Fund with that purpose. I don't like that this has been a flat number for 12 years, and we've done zero increases. We did zero increases last year and said, come back to us with a plan, and you've come back with some planning and a lot more discussion. And for us to just do a change in geography, I think the change in geography is the right approach, but I am not comfortable with a zero increase. And so agree on that. The other thing I think we need to really consider, and nobody has shown the numbers tonight, but it is in our packet, and maybe worth, if someone's got the graphic and pull them up, our surface water management fees compared to comparison cities. This data is old, but I suspect we have not caught up even with our planned $8 per year increase. I think early in 2021, as we're thinking about how this new fund is going to, or how this reconstructed fund is going to operate, we should evaluate those surface water management fees and really be planful on communications and how we're going to, what we might consider for those, because I suspect there are a lot of our peer cities that have really made a lot of progress in this area that we haven't. So I think that's another kind of opportunity to evaluate, do we have appropriate fund balance there? Other questions? Go ahead.
I just want to reiterate the need for good communication around this as well. We do collect these fees kind of outside of that general levy, and that is, that probably is unusual. It's not to us who sit here and talk about this month after month or year after year, but that is unusual. And I just think it's important that the community understands what it is we're trying to accomplish with this.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, Kathy, I couldn't agree more. And I think for everyone involved with the city, I think there is so much confusion about what the surface water fund is. I think that communication in 2021 will be critical, and that the explanation of why the lake funding is moved over to there is part of that communication. That will resolve a lot of the calls, questions, emails that I get, and concerns as we move forward. So I would also agree with that. And Dave, thank you for explaining that capital equipment outlays, street sweeper is definitely something that should be charged to the surface water fund. So absolutely support that need.
Councilmember Gerard.
I'm all for what Kathy's recommending here, but I also would like to bring up the sewer fund. We have a 3% increase for the sewer fund. And I would like to suggest to the council that we don't have an increase in the sewer fund this year. We received a $1.7 million on money from the state. And I think we could forego that 3% increase this year. And if the math is correct, and Patrick will correct me as he always does, I think it's about $100,000 that would not be going into the fund. But I would suggest that since we've got some nice bond money from the state, that we should forego it for this upcoming year.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that motion. Let me just say that if the council decides to do that, that's your decision. But I would hope that we don't make this an annual thing, because that's what's gotten us in trouble in the sewer fund before. That's what's gotten us in trouble in the water fund, is that we haven't met our obligations and haven't raised the rates. The $1.7 million is a grant. I believe it doesn't come in as a chunk of money. I think it's a reimbursement. If I misspoke about that, I'm sure Dave or Ryan will take care of that. But if the council does this, I just want to make sure that we don't start going down a path where we stop raising rates to meet our obligations. That's all.
Thank you. And Dave, go ahead.
Just to hit on that for the sewer rates, for so many years, we were using SAC charges to offset the sewer rates themselves. So while we weren't increasing the sewer rates, we were taking SAC dollars, which are supposed to be for improvements like the lift stations and all that. And instead of doing these projects, we were, offsetting sewer rate increases. So now grant money coming in, it's kind of going back to what we want to avoid now. The sewer rate should be for operations and the SAC charges should be for projects. Well, that grant money that's coming in is for, CIP projects, and what should be, purchased with SAC dollars, and the sewer rate is to fund, operations of the sewer department. So I just want council to be careful of going back to what in the past where we were keeping rates low by offsetting with SAC dollars coming in. That you'd like to try to build that fund balance of SAC money to keep doing projects. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Dave. Councilmember Monson.
Thank you, Mayor Bain. I'm kind of rewinding the conversation a little bit, but just wanted to say I too was not comfortable not having an increase for the Lake Association, having just lived by one of those public launches and seen the increase of boat traffic this year and the need that's out there. So I would support Councilwoman Bystrom's plan. I think that knowing that is the state of the human rights group, that makes sense to me.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilmember Bystrom, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to toggle back to Councilmember Gerard's proposal. I can absolutely see where he's coming from with that. I mean, we are always looking for opportunity to ease burden on our citizens. My concern with it, however, is that we land back where we were when we straightened all of this out, and knowing that we were going to, in order to get ourselves caught up, and not only caught up but ahead, we were going to be looking at some double-digit increases for a while. And I'm specifically referring to water, but I am a fan of smaller incremental increases rather than a big heavy hit at one time. So while I certainly understand his intent and appreciate his perspective, I'm concerned that that may be a setback for us. And it looks like we may have lost Mayor Bain.
Sam, it's your meeting now, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like it. Ryan, go ahead if you want to. I know Ryan has been trying to get a word in here, so go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, I'll just bring up some points of discussion here is, there's a lot of things that go into the city sewer system. And, the fortunate thing is we still have some growth areas within the city that are going to collect those SAC and area charges, but those are really meant to be, per your ordinance, to be spent on expansion or increasing capacity or service areas, not maintenance. And that's one thing that it's tough to differentiate the two, because we have gone so long on the maintenance, and some of the lift stations that are identified in the next project are from the late 60s, early 70s. And another thing with your sewer, right off the bat, right off the funds, you guys are paying $1 million a year to the Met Council just to take your flows to treat it. And in 2020, the Met Council had a 5% increase. The years before that, I know they had substantial increases too. So none of our sewer rates were even keeping up with the Met Council's rates, let alone inflation, maintenance, and other things that's we're looking at. The money that's coming forward for some sewer stuff, these projects that are in this next year's lift stations, those should have been done 30 years ago. Some of these got holes in them. The cans, there's the I&I is so high. Some of the electrical boxes, Public Works can't even touch them with their hands. They get electrocuted. And we certainly can share all those pictures with you. And this is stuff that we've done in past CIPs. And over the past, as we've had smaller increases, it's easier to plan and budget for accordingly than it is all of a sudden when the city came in and now we're talking a 10 or 15% increase. So that's why we're now back to where we're at with the proposed 3% versus what was originally all proposed and talked about over the last 10 years to where we're at today. And the amount of deferred maintenance, if you look in our, and this is another reason we laid out a 30-year CIP for sewer, water, and storm, so we can see the needs that we have that are just pure maintenance. The only thing that we have an expansion in there right now is trying to get sewer across in areas where we know future large projects are coming, or because of the sewer study we did do in the downtown area, I think it's plugged out in 2034, so we're not even actually funding it yet with the downtown sewer capacity issues. So it's unfortunate, I once gave a presentation on the city sewer system. We have enough pipe to go underground from here to Duluth, no problem. That's how much pipe's in the ground here. And we currently have 46 lift stations. We have a development that's now coming forward, and they're going to have a lift station when they totally build out. That'll be 47. And eventually we're going to have another one down in the headwaters area, which will be up to 48. So the maintenance and infrastructure is not going down. And I just want you guys aware of some of those decisions. And I know it's tough times. And that's another reason on the back end of all this is why we've been pushing the water efficiency so much and try to find grants for people to do high efficiency toilets, washing machines, and irrigation controllers, because the less water they use on a meter house, the less sewer, they're going to have as well. So, those are all the things that we've tried looking at comprehensive, and here we're at today.
I'm sorry for the lost internet connection. I am back now and on my phone trying to get my computer back up. Karen, go ahead.
Logistically, we have until 7:30 to finish this off before I think it's going to shut down, because I set this up for an hour-and-a-half meeting, not expecting it to go this far into the 7 o'clock meeting. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. It's now 7:16.
Thank you for that time check. Let's maybe do a global step back. And if there's anybody who's watching this meeting, please understand that this topic of our 2021 budget and the levy has been a subject of a number of workshop discussions going back to this summer. And so if this feels like we are in I's dotting and T's crossed mode, that is very much the case. Maybe let's just step back a minute and recognizing where we're at from the clock. Are there any other global topics that we want to talk about before we consider a motion this evening? And I am not seeing everybody on my phone here, so just please jump in if I'm not recognizing you. I'm not hearing any comments. I guess I would, and this relates a little bit to Councilmember Gerard's proposal on reducing the sewer rate increase. You know, one of the things that struck me as I was doing a kind of a from beginning to end review of the budget as prep for this meeting was how thankful I was that we now have that 10-year plan. And there are still a number of areas where we still have some pretty significant deficiencies. And I use them as kind of a guidepost of, are we doing enough? And while I don't like an increase year over year of over 5%, I recognize that there are still some significant areas where we are still covering lost ground. And in particular, the pavement fund stands out. And this will be the first time that we've started a park fund separate from park dedication fees. And I think both of those are areas where we still have some pretty strong deficiencies, and make me thankful we've got a 10-year plan that is drafted that start to show long-term impacts of how those things work together, but also gives me pause at this consideration of not taking the rate increase on the sewer fund, because as has just been pointed out, we're just barely out of the woods and still have, you know, a fair amount of ground to make up there as well. So I guess, you know, no proposed changes, but as I'm just doing my gut check of, does our plan set us up for what's in the future? What I see in the 2021 plan, as we've talked about some minor modifications this evening, I'm happy to support the budget this evening. Any other questions or specific points of feedback we should talk about?
All right, we can approve the budget with Kathy's recommendation at the same time and do it that way. I mean, what?
You should make a motion on any changes that you wish to make, just to be, and each change needs a motion and a vote.
Okay. Kathy, something you want to do that, or?
It's probably best for that to precede the resolution to approve the budget, I would imagine. Is that correct?
I would imagine, yeah.
Okay. I will make a motion to transfer or reallocate $10,000 of the Human Rights Commission 2021
Yes.
budget to and transfer it to the Surface Water Fund to be utilized by the Forest Lake Association for their project needs.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And Karen, would you take a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Gerard.
Aye.
Councilmember Husnick.
Aye.
Councilmember Byström.
Aye.
Councilmember Munson.
Aye.
Mayor Bain.
Aye. Motion approved. A quick point of logistics, maybe Patrick, this is for you or Sandy. Given that change, we have a resolution in front of us. Do we just instruct staff to update the budget reflected in the resolution for the motion that we just passed?
Yes, or if you give me a minute, I can tell you what the new numbers are.
We'll give you a minute for the new numbers.
That's all you get.
All righty. It's the pressure. So stormwater. And that's 50,000, 10,000, right?
Yeah.
10,000.
10,000.
I'm looking for the. So 488. Okay, is there any other changes then?
No,
Councilmember, any other changes? I'm not hearing any, and I'm not seeing all of you on my screen, so please chime in if there's any other changes. I think that's it, Patrick.
Okay, so for the record then, the surface water management, the revenue would change only to 498,900.
Mhm.
And the total of the resolution for the entire budget revenue would change to 22,172,949. I didn't even have to use a calculator for that one.
Council members, any follow-up questions on that? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for the resolution before us.
Laura, Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Husnick,
I make a motion that we adopt resolution 12-14-20-01. The resolution setting the 2021 tax levy and adopting the 2021 budgets with the changes that we just made.
I'll second.
there's a motion from Councilmember Husnick and a second from Councilmember Gerard. Any further discussion on the budget this evening? And again, I'm not seeing all of you, so please just chime in. I'm not hearing anything, and so Karen, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Gerard,
Aye.
Councilmember Husnick,
Aye.
Councilmember Munson,
Aye.
Councilmember Byström,
Aye.
Mayor Bain.
Aye, and our resolution is approved. With that, we are at the end of our planned agenda this evening. Jerry, thank you so much for the input and being here tonight. Much appreciated as always. And
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for listening to me, and the lake appreciates you.
we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for
All
being
right,
here.
thank you. Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. And Karen, could we have a roll call for adjournment, please?
Councilmember Gerard,
Aye.
Councilmember Husnick,
Aye.
Councilmember Munson,
Aye.
Councilmember Byström,
Aye.
Mayor Bain.
Aye. And it will take just a few minutes to get the technology transitioned for our next meeting, but I will see you all on our regularly scheduled council meeting in just a few moments. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.